Alright then gang, so now hopefully you've had a go at the challenge from the previous video and I'm going to show you my solution. So remember, this was the starting point, right? With just this text on the page, and this is the end point. So we needed to create this title bar at the top and this burger nav. When we click on that, we get the slide out menu and the animation of this icon at the top right here. So I'm going to show you now how I solved this challenge. Alright then, so to begin with, I'm inside this index.html file. Remember, this was the starter project, and I want to flesh out the HTML of two things right here inside the menu div. So the first thing is going to be the site title bar, and that is the thing that sits at the top of the page and stretches all the way across, and we have the site title of here in the right, and then on the left we have the burger nav icon, alright? And the second thing I want to put in here is the slide out navigation itself. That's the thing that slides out from the left when we click on the burger nav, and then when we click on the cross it slides back out again. Okay, so let's start with this thing right here, the site title at the top of the page. So what I'm going to do is a header tag for this, and it doesn't have to be a header tag, you can do something else if you prefer. And inside that we want two things. We want the burger icon, so I'll do a div for that first of all. So div with the class of burger. And to do the icon itself, I'm not going to use any kind of icon from the Google font family or anything like that. I'm just going to use 3 span tags because that's going to make it really easy to animate into a cross. So each span is going to represent a different line inside the burger, right? So let me just create these spans first of all. So the top one, the middle one, and the bottom one. So we can style those as 3 white lines. Now, what we're going to do when we click on that is animate them so that this is one part of the cross, one line in the cross, and the bottom one is one line in the cross, but the middle one right here is going to fade out. We're going to animate that one out, and then when we click on the cross, it fades back in again. All right? So that's how we're going to use these 3 spans right here to create the burger icon, but also the cross icon as well. Okay, so we have that. The next thing we need in the header is also the site title. So let's do an H1 for that, and we'll say site title. Now this is not really necessary. You don't have to do this. It wasn't really part of the challenge. Just makes it look a little nicer. All right, so we have this header right here. That's all we need. We've got the burger icon on the left, and we have the H1 on the right. Now let's maybe just style that a little bit before we go any further. So let me come over here to the index.css file. And I'm going to start inside the solution styles. Now the first thing I'm going to do is a selector for the menu. So remember, that's this thing right here, okay? Now, in fact, what we'll do is come back to that. I'm going to leave it for now because it's not really relevant to the template we've just created here. So we'll come back to that later. The next thing I'm going to do is a header selector. This is the thing we did just create right here. So inside here, we're going to give this a background, and that background is going to be 333, a dark grey. We're going to say display flex, and that means that the different things inside it, so this burger and also this H1, they're going to sit left to right inside there automatically, right? We align items to the center, and that aligns them vertically inside the title bar. So let me save this and show you so far. You can see we have the site title here. Let me just make this, in fact, we can't see the these things because we've not styled them. So we'll come back to that later on. Let me just move this out again. All right. So let's go back over here and carry on. The next thing I want to do is justify content. And that's going to be space between. And what that does is mean that the thing on the right over here, or below the burger, is going to sit way over on the right over here. And when we style it, the burger is going to sit way on the left, and there's all that space between. All right, so that's what this property does. And then after that, we're going to say padding is 10 pixels top and bottom, 20 pixels left and right, just to space it out a little bit. And also we need box sizing to be border box, like so, and that means it basically incorporates the padding into its overall width. And then I'm going to say color is EEE, so a light grey, and that's the text color. So if we take a look at this, we can see this way over on the right now because of this property right here, justified content, and also because we display flex. All right, so now we need to style up this thing right here, this burger nav, or this burger icon rather. So let me come down here and do a selector for the burger, like so. And first of all, we're going to say display relative, like so. That's going to be important later, so I'll come back to why we've done that later. I'm going to say font size is 1.2 ems, just to increase the size of this. And then the cursor is going to be pointer. All right. So that's the burger. We also need to style the spans inside it. So let me now come below that and say burger span. And what we want these to be is basically 3 white lines. So each one is going to display as block first of all. Then after that, we can say give it a width of around 30 pixels each. And the height of each one is going to be around 2 pixels. So 3 thin lines really. Let me just spell this correctly. All right. And then after that, we'll give each one a background to color it. And it's going to be EEE, so a very light gray. And then each one needs to be spread out from itself. In fact, let's save it so far and take a look. We can see now only 1 line, but that is actually 3 lines. They're just bunched together to make one big fat line. So what we need to do is give each one a margin bottom to spread them out. So about 5 pixels. And if we take a look at this now, that looks a lot better. All right. So that is the design of basically our title bar up here. So next we need to move on to the slide out nav template. So then the template for this is going to be pretty simple. All we need is a nav. So let's create that. And then inside that we'll do a UL for the different links. Each link is going to be inside an li tag. We can do an anchor tag for each one as well. We'll just say hash for the href to begin with. And this is going to be for home. I'm going to duplicate that a few times. The second one can say about. The third one could be contact. And then finally, this one is going to be shop. Doesn't really matter. All right. And that's pretty much it. That's all we need for our slide out nav really. One element to kind of slide out, the big kind of grey thing that's going to slide in the background. Then a UL inside that with all the links. That's pretty much it. Now you might be thinking, well, what about the cross icon? Because that was inside the navigation, right, that we clicked on. But actually, it's going to be this thing that animates to a cross. So we're going to click on that later as well to close the navigation, all right? And it's going to sit over the nav itself. All right, so if we take a look at this, we can see it right here looking ugly as sin. So let's style that up as well. And to do that, we need to head to the index.css file. All right then, so down here, let's do a selector for the nav. Like so, give it a background, which is going to be a darker grey this time, so 222. And then what we're going to say is give this a position of absolute. In fact, we'll do that at the end because I want to see what it looks like before we actually position it absolutely over everything else. So after the background, we'll say padding, and that's going to be 20 pixels all the way around. However, we'll say padding top is going to be 80 pixels to give it more space at the top, and that's so it gives it room for the cross to appear. All right, and then after that I want to say the height is going to be 100%. So ultimately it's going to be 100% of the page. So if I save this at the minute, then we can see that it goes down at least to the bottom of the page and a bit beyond because it's 100% height of this page. I've just noticed this thing right here is spelled incorrectly, so let me just go and correct that. It should be contact. All right. So after that, we can say the box sizing is border box again to take into account the padding into the overall height and width. And then after that, I'm going to give it a width of 200 pixels like so. So let me save that. And we can see it's this thing right here, okay? So we have that extra padding at the top for where the cross is going to be. Now, I'll style the links in a second, but first of all, what I want to do is give this a position of absolute so that it doesn't sit below this title, but it sits above it at the top. So to do that, let's come down here and say position absolute, and then after that, we'll also say from the top, it's going to be 0 pixels. So it's going to sit right at the top, like so, and it hides the title bar underneath, and currently it's also hiding the burger nav. Now that can't happen because when the navbar is open, we need that icon so we can close it again. So we'll solve that problem later on. For now, let's carry on. So down here, what I'm going to do is also style the anchor tags inside the navbar. So let me do that. And we'll say color is going to be white or FFF. And after that, we'll say display as block each one. And then we can give each one as well a margin bottom. And that's going to be about 6 pixels to space them out a little bit. And also a font size of 1.2 M. All right, so if we take a look at that, it looks a bit better, right? Sweet. Okay, so now I said that that icon needs to sit above this navbar itself. And the way we can do that is by using Z-index. So what I could do is I could come to the nav and say, give this a Z-index of 0, right? And by the way, Z-index determines the stacking order of the elements that kind of go into the page, all right? So that's going to have a Z-index of 0, and the higher the Z-index, the more to the forefront something comes. So up here, I can now come to the burger itself, and I can give that a Z-index as well. And what that would do, if we gave it something higher than this, is bring it more to the foreground. So I could say right here, Z-index is going to be 1, and save it. Now, if we take a look at this, we can now see this icon right here, okay? Now, if this wasn't on the screen, if I come down here and maybe say for the nav, just give this a margin left or even just a left property of minus 200 pixels because that was the width of the whole nav. If I do that, then it should go off the screen, right? But we should still see the burger nav underneath. Awesome. So this should kind of be the initial state of the website, right? We don't see the nav. And when we click on this, basically what we want to do is animate this property, I suppose, this left property, so that it goes to 0. So if that goes to 0, then we see the navbar, right? And this is still on top. It should animate later on to a cross, but then when we click on that, this should go back to minus 200 pixels, like this. So that's what we kind of need to do, all right? Okay, so first of all, let's see how we can control that sliding in and sliding out of the navbar. Now, in order to do that, we need to basically get a reference to this icon right here, or this burger div rather. And then when we click on that, we want to fire some kind of function. So we need to attach an event listener to this div so that when we click it, we fire a function. And what that's going to do is add a class to this nav right here. And that class is going to be something like open. So when we click on this, fires a function and it adds a class of open to this nav. And when that nav gets a class of open, we can style it so that the left property is 0 instead of minus 200 pixels. Does that make sense? So let's do that. So I'm going to go to the index.js, and first of all, we need a handle on that burger. So this element right here, this div with a class of burger. Now to do that, we can say const, and you can call it what you want. I'm going to call it burger, and we set it equal to document.query selector, like so. And then inside there, we want the burger class. So that's this class right here. Okay, so after that, I also want to get a handle on the nav as well, because we need to apply a class of open to that and then maybe take it away when we close the nav as well. So let's do another constant. I'm going to call it nav, but again, call it what you want. Documents.query selector. All right, and then this time we want the nav element, like so. All right, so we have those two things. Now we want to attach an event to this burger. So we can say burger.add event listener to do this. So this is how we attach event listeners to certain elements, right? We get a handle on that element and then we use this method. And then the first argument is going to be the type of event that we want to listen to. That's going to be a click event. And then after that, we have a function which will fire when we click on that burger icon. So what do we want to do when we click on this function? Well, to begin with, we want to give a class of open to the nav, right? So if we click on that, we give a class of open to the nav and then it shows. But thereafter, if we click it again, once it becomes a cross, then we want to take away that class of open. So essentially, every time we click on the burger, we want to toggle the class of open from the nav. Right? Does that make sense? We want to either add it or take it away. So to do that, we can say nav, which is this thing we grabbed a hold of, and then we use the .classList property. That gets us basically a list of classes, and then we can use a method on that called toggle. So we want to toggle the open class, and what that means is that the first time we click on the burger, because it doesn't have the class already, it's going to give it the class of open. The next time we click on the burger, it's going to take it away. The next time, it's going to give it. The next time, it's going to take it away, and so forth. It's going to toggle it on and off, essentially, or open and closed. So that's the first thing we want to do. Now, also, eventually, we want to style the burger nav itself differently when we click on it, because it needs to animate into a cross. So I also, every time we click on this, want to toggle a class on that burger nav as well, that burger nav div right here. So what I'm going to do is apply a class of open to that when we first click on it, and then when we click on it again, we take it away. So the same method, toggle. So I can say burger.classList.toggle and then open. So now these two elements, this one right here and this one right here, they're going to have a class of open toggled. So when we click on it to begin with, they'll both get a class of open, and we can style them differently. And then when we click on it again, they both get those classes of open taken away. So again, we can style it differently. All right. So we're toggling those classes. Awesome. And we can see that if we save it right now and open up DevTools, go to the elements. So if we open up the menu, we can see we have the header and the div with the class of burger right here. We also want to see this nav as well. So these are the two elements that should have that class toggled. So I'm going to click on this, and we can see now we get open over here on both. Click on it again, and now it goes. Again, we get it. Again, they go. Awesome. All right, so now we have those classes. Now we can style the burger nav and also the slide out navigation dependent on those classes. So let's do that inside the CSS. So this is why I kind of added these comments earlier on, so we can kind of separate our styles a little bit. So we can style the open states of things right here. Now the first thing I want to do is target the nav, and when that gets the class of open, what I want to do is change the left property from -200 pixels to just be 0. So I can say left is going to be 0, like so, and that's all there is to it. So now if I click on this, we can see it. If I click again, it goes. All right, it's not sliding in at the minute, but at least we can see it. All right, the next thing we want to do is basically change this right here into a cross. Now the way we're going to do that is by targeting each one of those spans individually. So if we go over here, we have 3 spans, right? We want to kind of fade this one out, and then we want to rotate the top one and the bottom one kind of 45 degrees each in different directions, and that's going to form a cross then. So let me show you this. I'm going to say burger to grab the burger div first of all, but we only want to style these differently when this has a class of open. So burger.open, and then we want a span, but we only want to style here the first one, the top one. So we slant it, and that is going to be done using nth child and then putting a 1 inside it. We could use first child if you wanted as well. So what we want to do is transform this, and the way we want to transform it is by rotating it. So we can say rotate, and then in brackets we say 45 degrees like so. Now if I save this, preview it, watch this, we can see this one now becomes this line, which is kind of one side of a cross. We just need this one at the bottom to go that way as well. So let's do the bottom one. I'm going to copy this, and right here I'm going to say nth child 3 because we want to style the bottom one, not the middle one. And then this time we don't want to rotate it 45 degrees because that ends up as this, where the parallel. But this time we want to rotate it minus 45 degrees, right? So the opposite way. Now it almost looks like a cross, but they need to kind of go up and down a little bit more. Now before we do that, let's get rid of the middle one as well. So let's say here, nth child 2, and then we don't need to transform this. All we want to do is say the opacity is 0 and the width is going to be 0 as well. So if we save that, we should see over here that middle one goes. Alright, so now we want to basically move this top line a little bit down and move this bottom line maybe up so that they meet more in the middle and it forms a cross rather than this kind of teepee on its side. So let's now add to this transform. I'm going to say translate, and it's going to be in the Y direction up and down, and it's going to be 10 pixels. So that means go down 10 pixels. And then we want something similar for the bottom one. So let's add this on. And this time it needs to be minus 10 pixels, so it goes up. And when we do that, it looks a lot nicer. All right, so now the icon is changing when we close and open this navigation. Awesome. So the only thing really left to do is animate everything. So we need to animate this thing out, and we also need to animate the crosses as well, or the burger nav to the cross and vice versa. Now, the way we're going to do that is not by using keyframes or anything like that. It doesn't need to be that complex. We can just use transitions. And this is going to be really simple to do. So right at the bottom, we have this comment for transitions. And all I'm going to do is target the nav first of all. You could also add this up here if you wanted to, but I'm going to do it down here just so we keep our different parts separate. And I'm going to say transition, and we'll transition the left property because that's the thing that's changing. It goes from 0 to minus 200 back and forth. So we want to kind of transition that, and we want to give it a easing function, which is going to be ease in, and that just makes it look a little bit more natural. And then the time it's going to take for this animation or transition to occur, and we're going to say do it over 0.3 seconds. So this transition property right here just means transition a certain property when it changes, or animate a certain property when it changes from point A to B. So when it goes from 0 to minus 200, it's not just going to kind of pop from 0 to minus 200, it's going to transition from 0 to minus 200 and vice versa as well. So the other one we need to do is for the spans inside the burger. So let's say burger span like so, and this needs to be full stop, not a comma, and then transition, and it's going to be all properties this time. We could specify two separately, but I'm just going to say all to catch all of these things right here. So we're transitioning the opacity and the width, and also this transform property right here. Okay, so this is also going to be ease in, and we're going to time this to be the same amount of time, which is 0.3 seconds. So this means now when we click on that burger icon and we transform two of the spans, we rotate them and translate them, that's going to kind of animate or transition from point A to B rather than just kind of pop into the new positions. And the same is true for this one right here. So it's going to fade out over time, and the width is going to get slower over time. And in both cases, it's going to happen over 0.3 seconds, so fairly quickly. So I'm going to save that. Fingers crossed, this is all going to work. Click it, everything animates, and we close it, everything works. Awesome. So there we go, my friends. That is this first challenge solved. So I hope you all enjoyed that challenge. If you did, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. That really means a lot, and I'm going to see you in the very next one.